So to summarise where we are, you've hopefully seen the previous videos. If not, feel free to watch them, or I'll just bring you quickly up to date. The H8 front panel is actually only loosely put back on at the moment. We still have this switch onto the H85 serial board that allows us to turn the IRQ service on and off, which seems to be necessary in order for the H17 HDOS to actually boot. I've still got a serial lead onto the laptop which is in front of me that's going to replace the H9 terminal still with it tapped into the H85 board. I haven't had the ability to find the problem yet with the cassette side of it, although we have replaced the UART on the cassette side, which does seem to have improved things and stops the card crashing. The floppy drive controller card just worked off the bat, which is great, and gives us the memory test routine built in, which saves us time to type it in while we've been diagnosing the problems on the 16K and 8K RAM boards. They're fixed, and what was the 4K board, and I'm almost certain now that that 4K board was what was with this machine originally. That's up to 8K with some new chips fitted, and so we've got a 24K machine, which is of course the absolute minimum you need in order to get adventure running, which of course has been my ultimate goal for this H8, to be able to run that. You would have seen the video on the H17 disk drive. That's now running and has an SVD virtual disk in, which can allow us to either replace the single drive and pretend to be a dual drive virtual one, or to be a paired drive, or we can just use it as a single drive, which is what it's set up for the moment, so it's genuine. What I wanted to share with you beforehand perhaps was some of these electronics magazines that I found to update you a bit on why I would have been aware of the H8. Looking back through these are issues I had at the time. These are the three I've got. Electronics Today International from February 1978. This might even be the metal detector I built around that time. So February 1978, the Electronics Today magazine has got a varied collection of items in it. The Chromatonics door time, which we were definitely building in large quantities by then. I was working up in the attic assembling them. So plus all the test equipment and the usual items. Obviously advertising electronics tomorrow with the R2D2 on it. So originally when Star Wars came out, for those who are following my things about Scrumpy and John Miller Kirkpatrick, was System 68 from the other projects I'd love to work on. I haven't done any videos on it yet, but I am sort of making slow progress towards doing something on it. It's well worth following up on the Scrumpy ones as well if you want to know a little bit about JMK, who was a technical writer for this magazine. Sadly died young, created the Scrumpy. There we go, microfile. So now this is written by Gary Evans, and is a little bit about, looks at 2 new personal computing systems, and this is the NASCOM. So like I said, this is the February 1978 issue. So this was the issue of the NASCOM personal computer, the NASCOM 1, and in the bottom corner we've got a picture of our Heathkit's H8 with its cassette deck and machine itself. Now this would have been the one that had the 4K of RAM card, and you would have, they're saying here it should be available in the spring of 1978, and one of a range of home computers available at that time. And the other one they mentioned was coming, is it says the 3 systems described so far, which was the TRS-80 is the one of them, the NASCOM obviously, they can be joined by the Heathkit H8 and the Commodore PET. So we've also got a little bit of a shot of CFAX and Oracle. So fascinating magazine, but definitely some of the first mention of the H8 in the press, and of course it's got the Heathkit catalogue advertisement with their digital clock. And this one is the one I covered in a tweet, but it was the one from which I bought the amplifier modules on a special offer, I think, that created the stereo I was busy building. It's also the one that's got a review of the very first PET. Quite the chiplet keyboard. Free in this one is a complete Tandy catalogue, which I haven't pulled out, but is the centre of the catalogue. So the 1978 electronics catalogue from Tandy. We talked about catalogues being a real, so it's a shame it's not the Heathkit one, but it's full of lovely kits you'd have got from Tandy. I suspect I think I've covered this before, and I'm sure my speakers are in here. I bought, there we are, to go with my stereo, exactly the speakers I bought, which is the Electronics of the Day Crash Course on Home Computing 32-page supplement. This is June 1978 now, so getting a little bit further up. We won't go through all of the magazine. Home Computing supplement, nice big NASCOM one advert at the front, and of course we see the couple of machines, the NASCOM, the PET, which has now been released and was reviewed in the April issue, the H8, which they said was coming, and look at that, the Byward Scrumpy 3. Again, I would thoroughly encourage you to look into that machine if you're not aware of it. It is particularly unusual, and this is pretty much where you would have been, or what you'd been thinking about in June 1978. So just having a quick look at the H9 terminal again. When you power it on, you do end up with a cursor in the top left screen, which I hadn't noticed before. And following the instructions in the manual, if you press the auto carry and the baud rate and hold on the repeat key, then in theory it should generate a repeating key, which it doesn't, but hopefully you can hear that little click in. It seems to indicate that some of the functionality is working for generating the keys. So looks like we might be able to make a bit more progress on this terminal. So taking the cover plate off the keyboard, you can see it's fairly grubby even after a rough clean, and it's going to need quite a bit more. Luckily the keycaps come off fairly easily. So we're now going to take a look at the underside of the H9, which is where the actual logic boards are. Apologies for the audio today. I foolishly put the washing machine on when I was planning on filming, so we've got a bit of a racket coming from the adjoining room. Hopefully we should be able to take a quick look at the logic board underneath this H9 terminal today. So I've got on my trusty flat-bladed screwdriver. We should be able to remove these screws and just take a quick look at it. As you'll have seen in this short clip, that it is actually making some clicks and noises, so it's possible that there is some functionality already happening. Now I don't think these are part of it. No, they're not. There we go. So we can reveal all of the logic boards underneath, which actually look very, very clean and tidy, which is good. So maybe a slightly better angle for the camera. It does look very tidy. All the connectors seem to be pushed in fine for above. Copyright 1977, Heath Company. Now, what I'm looking for in a visual inspection is to see if we've got any blown tants. This is the character generator board. No, it doesn't seem to be anything but all pretty much discrete ICs. An R03 2513, I think that's actually the one on the Triton, isn't it? And the crystal. So quite a complicated design, all discrete logic. So it's going to be a fair bit of debugging needed. I think we'll probably have to do this as a completely separate series, looking at restoring it and pulling in the logic analyzer to see how it functions. And the machine's going to spin up, isn't it? So let's give that a chance to finish. One thing I'm going to do now a minute is I'm going to change it over so the SVD is the boot drive, SY0, and the physical floppy WAMCO is going to be the second drive. So this first pin here is set for, at the moment, it is DS1, DS2, DS3, so DS3 is on. I'm going to disable DS3, it's quite stiff, and I'm going to set DS2, which is going to mean it is drive SY1 when it's addressed. The H8 has already actually booted HDOS from a disk. but I've now installed H19 Term by George Farris on the Linux box, such as quite a nice little thing. You probably will have noticed that as the capture in the adventure episode if you watched it. Just thought it might be interesting to catch up a little bit with some of the research I've been doing as well. I've got a few magazines we've turned up through the woodwork, which we're going to have a look at. And I always remember this seeing this iconic advert on online when I was looking. Is the red one from, and it's from page 51 of Scientific American in September 1977. Now, I've actually been a subscriber to Scientific American for ever since I can remember, probably when I was 13 or 14, so it would have been around about 78, and I've got all the magazines, except I didn't have any in 1977, so I had a little look around. They're quite expensive to ship in from the US. This is a well-known issue, actually. This is the one, the microelectronics one, and it's quite a big, thick document. They raise a fair price, and international postage is not cheap, so some came up, funny enough, as a buy it now offer, which was actually most of 77, and so it added another year to the front. I thought, well, I'll grab that. So I quickly looked through the magazine, and I thought, is there some great articles in here? We'll probably do a topic on it, but I thought, well, that's interesting. I should now have the actual advert. So I had a page 51, and you've got UNICEF. Okay, that was a bit strange, I thought. It's got an article on the back. So if you go to the other side of that binding, you end up on page 213, and it's W.H. Freeman and Company, who've got a place at 58 Kings Road, Reading, England. So I suspect that some of the sheets were printed with different adverts depending on which country. So you'd probably need an American version to get that page. Interesting little bit of I didn't realise about Scientific American. So the other thing I did is I may or may not have seen this when I did an attic raid, because I thought I had all the electronics magazines thrown out years ago, and I know a lot were damaged in a leak in a shed, and I did find a lot. And it turns out I actually had the February or March 1981 of Electronics Today International, and now it's quite late, but that contains the page 41, building a Heathkit article, which is literally going right the way through building a H8. It's from a system choice. He's got 2 pages, I think, covering it. Here as well, there we are, and a nice big centre spread with the layout diagram and the CPU card, and following on. So it's a great little find, really, from my attic. And of course, in the March 1981 issue, you've also got 69 more on the H8. If we can find page 69, and there it is. There's a flat page there, so it's actually now quite a detailed description of how the H8 works, and look inside of it. And it's a pretty impressive little article, really. He does seem to like it, and he got it working. So I love looking through old electronics magazines. They're great. So going back to the H9, it's probably useful to understand the structure of this, because it's not, as you might expect, a machine that's got any kind of microprocessor in it. It's pure TTL logic. This is an extract of just the overall block diagram, which should help you understand it from what we've seen in the previous systems, because they pretty much correspond to the boards. We know that here the CRT and the flyback side of it is working, probably because we've got this little dot in the screen, and you see it fade off as it drops out. So I'm reasonably certain the video side of it is working. We don't know whether the character generator is working. We really, because obviously we need to see whether that side of it is. So cleverly, the way this sort of works is you've got the input-output card, which we've seen a picture of previously, which provides the parallel and serial connectivity. Obviously, we've got the main keyboard, PCB as well. You've got this RAM and counter board, which basically generates the content of the video, and you've got the timing and processing unit, which pretty much is the equivalent of a microprocessor, I suppose, in terms of moving stuff around the system. So the idea being is the keyboard effectively ejects characters onto the ASCII bus. Now they can end up obviously in the RAM for being stored in positions. They can also go directly out of the I/O port in order to go out of the system. Some of the keys generate cursor and mode control data, which changes the way the timing and processing units works, and obviously that has effects on how the counter control lines move as it moves through the RAM, depending on where the data is going to be stored or where it's going to be pulled back out of. And of course you've also got the timing and horizontal counters, which are coming out of this character generator board, and that effectively takes data along the ASCII bus and out into the video display, or out to the I/O port, depending on the direction of travel as they're moving. So it's quite a complex device. There is a next level down if we take a look of the video, which is a bit more detail. If I start in here, so you've got the video side of it, which we're reasonably confident is probably working. So we're probably getting the video generation out of the board. So an interesting thing will be looking at making sure we think we're getting the vertical hold, horizontal sync, etc. off of this character generator. So we'll need to investigate the character generator board to see whether it is generating data onto the bus. So my plan is to stick the analyzer on the bus so we can see data moving around the system as we try different tasks. Whether the I/O board is working is fairly irrelevant initially, because obviously it's going to be allowing us to do some work from the keyboard and the RAM counter movement character generator with the TPU. Whether we can actually get out of the terminal, we can leave till a later date. So we got a fairly complex bit of engineering to look into, I think, which is going to take up, as I say, probably a series of videos itself. I'm lucky enough that I have got the full schematics and the managed manuals. So in terms of the timing and processing unit, obviously we've got a number of programmed logic arrays, PLA chips, which we're going to need to make sure, I think as a first task, we'll read those out and make sure they actually contain the data they're supposed to. That's going to make it very difficult to work with the system otherwise. I think there's a couple of those that deal with addressing and logic. All the chips are socketed, so I mean in theory it is possible that I could pull each of the TTL chips and just test them in a tester, to give us a sort of bit of a heads up that we haven't got any faulty chips. I might well just do that. It's a bit brute force, but I haven't got another one of these devices I can compare with. So that's probably going to be worth taking a look at. The RAM and counter circuit board, if we take a bit of a view back to it, obviously we need to test the 1K by 4 RAM probably. And we could just test some of these chips and circuitry as an aside. So it'll depend on what the approach. But I think the first thing we're going to do is actually take a look at the programmed PLA and so on the board. And they're basically 256-bit read-only memories. So we've got the pinout from them. We know the chip numbers, there's 3 of them, so it should be perfectly feasible to pull those and just put 5 volts on them and read the contents. We're lucky enough as well that the service manual contains some details about them. So it contains the PLA code values we'd expect to get out of it. If we put those addresses in, this is the data we would expect to get. This is for IC724, which is the 44412 part number. And of course they've also got one for the 11, which is a similar sort of idea. And then finally there's one for the IC728, the 44410. So hopefully we can get those out of the machine and read them out as a good first start. As you can see, it's a fairly significant and useful manual as normal from Heathkit. They do have quite a significant ability to produce manuals. There's no two ways about it. It's a bit slow to render obviously, but there we go. So we shall see how far we get with those ROM chips and move forward. So I'm going to start with the character generator, which is actually the same chip as is on the Triton, R032513. Now this is the one actually out of my Triton, which I built a little jig to read. If we have a little look at the R032513 character generator ROM, effectively you've got some address lines, 5 bits of address out, some not collected, grounds are usually here on pin 10, VCC is on 24, some other NCs, so there's a few different lines. But if you, obviously the TL866 doesn't know how to program one of these chips, but if we look at a 2716 in comparison, you can see that we could probably, the 2716 EEPROM got a similar sort of idea. They've got some address lines, some data lines. There's 8, not 5. Ground is down here on 12. VCC is on 24. There's a couple of other bits, but essentially there are the same sort of pins on it, just a different pin out. So what I've done is built this little jig which effectively converts the pins from the where they would be over onto a breadboard. I've got a pull-up resistor pack here which allows to pull up some of the lines so they're all high, and that allows us to make sure the pins are seen by the device programmer. So if we take a look at our XG Pro, I've got it set to a 2716 chip. So if I do a device and I read it, we should be able to read in the contents, which we can. And I need to, so I can do that. So it starts OOE11. If I open my copy of the Triton ROM, which if I should have here, R03 ROM, and load it into the buffer. It's got the same figures, but let's just do a device verify and hit the verify, and sure enough it verifies fine, and that means that the ROM is perfectly good and usable. So I wanted to do that before I change the pinouts round to try the other chips. So there we go, we got a good character generator ROM, which is a good start for this board. Next we're going to have a look at the PLAs from the other boards and see where we go from there. Good result.